Welcome to this week's episode of Two Guys on Politics with co-hosts, former Illinois Congressman Bill Lipinski and myself, columnist at the Southwest News newspaper group and Arab News in the Middle East, Ray Hanania. And this is Season 4, Episode 19 of Two Guys on Politics, which is broadcast on YouTube at twoguysonpolitics.com and also on the U.S. Arab Radio Network on WNZK AM 690 radio in Detroit, Michigan. I don't know, Bill, if we're having any impact on those Michiganders, but we'd love to hear from them if they want to go to Two Guys on Politics and send us their opinions about the show. We invite everybody out there in the audience to subscribe to the podcast. You just go to twoguysonpolitics.com. My co-host, of course, Bill Lipinski. Bill served as Democratic committeeman and alderman of Chicago's 23rd Ward, and he was elected to Congress in 1983 and served through 2005. He currently writes the Right from the Center opinion column at the Southwest News newspaper group, and I covered Chicago City Hall from 1976 until 1992, and Chicagoland, Illinois, national politics ever since, writing opinion columns for the Southwest News newspaper group, as well as for columns and news on Arab American issues for Arab News at arabnews.com. We have several topics that we're going to talk about that will be featured this week on WNZK AM 690 radio in Detroit and online. And we thank the radio host, Layla El-Husseini, who, by the way, Bill, is Syrian American. Layla started this radio program and station about, I think, 15 years ago. So she broadcasts Monday through Friday every morning, and she's expanded her radio program. She doesn't own the station, but she does have her programs broadcast on WNZK AM 690, where I've done some shows with her. So we have two topics today. The first topic is in segment one, President Trump and his criticism with Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell. We're going to talk a little bit about the economy, and I don't know what looked like disagreements. Powell disagreed so much with Trump, but Trump seemed to be at least courteous and not mean. And then in segment one, you're going to do your column we'll talk about your column about the breakdown of the the two-parent family and how it's going by the wayside. And then in segment two, we will talk about Zelenskyy and criticism from inside Ukraine, which to me is, I'm sure is a little surprising. It weakens the government in the face of this war with Russia over his efforts and the parliament's efforts to eliminate two anti-corruption bodies that were set up originally in 2014, before he was prime minister or the president of Ukraine. And now that they want to eliminate them and put that under the control of the Prosecutor General's office, and a lot of Ukrainians are upset about that. How is that going to impact the war with Russia? And then finally, we'll do my column, which I'm writing. I haven't posted yet, but it's on the Trump's war with the news media and his latest explosion over an episode of South Park, the satirical comic cartoon that's been very popular for 27 years. It's South Park. I don't know if everybody's heard about it, but it really skewered President Trump, and he's upset about it, just angry. And the White House has issued a formal protest to Paramount, which broadcasts South Park. So anyway, our web address is Two Guys on Politics. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I'll be on with my co-host, Bill Lipinski, and we'll start talking about segment one, President Trump and his criticism of the Federal Reserve and discussions about the economy, and Bill's column on the breakdown of the two-parent family and how it's deteriorating. I'm Ray Hanania with Bill Lipinski, and we will be right back right after these messages.
A car accident can change your life in an instant. As a result of a car accident, you may become unemployed. As a result of a car accident, you may need a lot of medical treatment. People think that insurance companies are on their side. Why? Because they're giving them one or two benefits. Are they giving them all the benefits they deserve? How would one know unless you consult with an attorney? Call the law offices of Jumana Kiruz at 248-557-3645. 248-557-3645.
With more than 30,000 successful in vitro fertilizations, IVF Michigan is now ranked as one of America's best fertility clinics according to Newsweek magazine. IVF Michigan fertility centers are the recognized leaders in high-quality fertility care. With locations in Bloomfield Hills and 9 other cities in Michigan and Ohio, IVF has experts in all aspects of the field. A founding member, American board-certified Dr. Nicholas Shama, is one of the leading reproductive endocrinologists in Michigan and Ohio. He has performed over 20,000 successful IVF cases, and it's helped thousands of couples fulfill their dreams of parenthood. When it's time to get personalized care from Dr. Nicholas Shama at one of America's best fertility clinics, call IVF Michigan Fertility Centers in Michigan and Ohio toll-free at 855-952-9600. 855-952-9600.
Every year in Michigan, approximately 3,000 people die of drug overdose. Today's drugs are more addictive and deadlier than ever before. Most street opioids tested contain a potentially lethal dose of fentanyl. Drug overdoses are preventable. Keep naloxone on hand. Together, we can change the statistics. Learn how to save lives at michigan.gov/SUD. A message from the Michigan Department of Health and Human Services.
And welcome back to Two Guys on Politics. I'm Ray Hanania with my co-host, Bill Lipinski. Bill, how are you?
I'm doing very well, Raymond. How are you today?
Doing really good. The world hasn't changed much since our last Two Guys on Politics podcast last week. It's still as crazy as ever. I don't know if you got a chance to see this latest kerfuffle, I'll call it. It was very polite. It wasn't as mean as Trump has made it out to be in the past between President Trump and Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell. And you know, right, he's been attacking Powell because he wants the interest rates to go down. And for some reason, Trump thinks that if he brings the interest rates down, it's good for America. Maybe before we talk about his fight with Powell, what do we know about the impact of interest rates? Do we know anything about it in terms of, obviously we don't want high interest rates, but on the other hand, do they really, prevent us from living good lives?
Well, one of the greatest times for people purchasing homes was the early 1960s when I purchased mine, and I purchased mine in 1962, and the interest rate was 6%. Now, when you bought your first home, what was the interest rate?
Yeah, see, my first home, I think, was 1981, maybe 80 or 81. And the interest rate was 12.8%.
Unbelievable.
I bought it. Yeah, it was. But, we went through a period in the 80s where everything was skyrocketing. But I got to tell you, houses were flying off the shelf. People were buying houses like crazy, even with 12%, because if you have a business or you deduct you file your income taxes and you have deductions. I'm a sole proprietor, so I have everything lumped together as a company and I deduct everything. I can deduct those interest rates. They're deductible. And I think they may even be deductible from regular families too, off their income taxes. So I didn't mind that interest rate as long as I could deduct it. It was the property tax that you could deduct also that Trump screwed us on the last time he was president, limiting it to $10,000. We used to be able to deduct everything.
I know that we thought that 6% interest was so very, very high. It was a 20-year mortgage, 6% interest, that we paid it off in 9 years, right? Because we thought we were paying so much, particularly when About 5 years in, they increased it to 6.25%. And at that at that time, my wife and I decided that we've got to get out from under this. This is horrendous. And well, it really wasn't so bad looking back at all. But at the time, we seemed to think it was terrible. And I did think it was terrible at the time. In fact, I even went to a different savings and loan to see if I could get a better deal from them. But they said I would be better off staying where I was at because of all the new charges that they would have to put on my loan.
Yeah, and I remember, we did shop around to see if we could get a lower interest rate because it made the monthly payment cheaper. A higher interest rate makes your payment higher. So yes, maybe it could have an impact. But this over the past several months, President Trump has been attacking Jerome Powell. First, he said he wanted to fire him, and then it turns out the president can't fire the Federal Reserve Chairman, Jerome Powell. I think that Congress would have to, they appoint him and he serves out his term and they would appoint somebody. So that's a little confusing. I mean, Trump has changed everything, the order of everything. I'm not sure. I know Trump is saying he would appoint a successor to Powell when Powell's term ends. But his criticism of Powell is that he wants Jerome Powell to reduce the interest rates. And if he reduces the interest rates, it's good for the American people and will save them money. But I think it just makes him look good in the face of all those huge increases that he passed in his budget, the big, beautiful bill that the Democrats call the big, ugly bill. So I don't know who to believe, to be honest with you.
Well, unfortunately, once again, we get back to that same point, Ray. Who do you believe?
Yeah.
Neither one of the parties are believable any longer because everything that they say simply enhances their position, makes themselves look good. And you have almost no one inside of a party criticizing the party itself. And the news media, we got your left, your right news media. How can you believe them?
Yeah.
CNN, they don't say a good word about Trump. Okay. You go to Fox, Fox thinks Trump, the rises and sun sets on his head. He's fantastic. So you really have to be diligent as an American citizen to delve into a lot of different sources to find out what the truth is today. And unfortunately, so many Americans do not have the appetite or the interest to do that.
Well, we're so busy. I mean, the average family now are two working parents, if you're even married, some families only have a single parent, but, both parents are in today's world have to work, to pay the bills and for all the things that they want. I remember when I was younger, my dad and mom both worked. But it was a much easier life. I think the house back when in the 60s, the cost of the house was only $3,000. It wasn't a lot of money. Inflation has destroyed us, and trying to control inflation, I guess there is no way to control inflation because that destroys our economy, I think.
Well, you can control inflation by not printing money. That's why you wind up having inflation. The government prints too much money. But unfortunately, our price for a house, our first house, which we bought in 1962, was $18,500.
Well, you had a big house because ours was only we lived on the southeast side of Chicago, was I think $4,000.
No, it had
18,000 was one of those mansions. You must have lived in one of those mansions.
Yeah, that's why they called me Bungalow Bill, because I lived in one of those mansions. Yes.
Was it a bungalow, by the way, or similar?
It was a bungalow. Yes.
Bungalow, yeah. Those are beautiful homes, by the way. Bungalows, very nice, well built. That was a character of Chicago. Those bungalows, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah,
Yep.
those are
Backbone of Chicago.
And as you say, it was at that time, it did increase the cost of the house, right? The interest, obviously.
Oh, sure, absolutely.
What you have to pay every month on your mortgage. But this week, yesterday, I think it was, President Trump and Senator Tim Scott, I think it was.
That's Tim Scott. Yeah.
Is it Tim Scott?
Yes.
Yeah, and
He ran for president for a while.
yeah, Tim Scott. I've never heard of anything about him. I guess he's from he's a business and
South
politician
Carolina, I
in
believe.
South Carolina. Is that what it is? And I don't know. Is he like he's a Republican, African American, and Trump obviously was touting him, and for obvious reasons. I think he likes to exploit the racial thing a little bit, makes it look like he's not anti-black or anti-minority, because he does get criticized a lot for that. But him and Senator Scott were touring the construction of the new Federal Reserve complex area. I guess it's 3 buildings. And Tim Scott leaned to the president and said, "Hey, that here's there's cost overruns in the billions." It was like 3.1 billion. He said the costs were like enormous. And Trump goes, "Yeah, we got it. Mr. Powell isn't doing a very good job controlling the costs of these constructions." And Powell's looking at him like, "What are you guys talking about? You don't even," basically, and you could see in his face, he's saying, "You don't even know what you're talking about." And then Tim Scott pulls out a piece of paper and hands it to the president, and the president opens it up and says, "See, right here, it says it's from your office." And Jerome Powell takes the paper, very nice. He was very respectful. I give Jerome Powell a lot of credit. And he looks at it and he says, "Oh, this is an old building. You're talking about a building that's already been built 5 years ago and been paid for." And then Scott, Senator Scott, immediately goes, "Oh, no, but it's still an overcost. There was a overpayments, and we're going to be paying." And Trump's going, "Yes, we're still paying for that money." And Jerome Powell just shaking his head left to right, going, "Oh my God, these people, he doesn't know." But believe it or not, in spite of that confrontation, it still was friendly. Trump, which is a character thing about him, when you're not with him, he will call you every kind of name. But when you're in front of him, he doesn't have I don't know if it's the courage or the disrespect to call you a name to your face. Whatever he says about people, he says on TV, not to their face or in his social media. And he joked with Powell, saying, "Listen, I know we've had some disagreements, and I don't want to say anything bad about him. I'm with him. We want to move forward. What's good for the country, blah, blah, blah." And then he took his left hand and slapped Powell, not on his butt, on the side of his back, and said, "All I wish is that Powell would reduce the interest rates, because with interest rates so high, people can't buy homes, and homes are not selling." And Tim Scott went on a big rant about, yeah, if we had lower interest rates, our home markets would increase and that would create jobs. And he just went on and on. And I'm going, what are these guys talking about? Trump and Scott, it was like they didn't even know what it was they were talking about.
Well, I had a dinner once with Senator Scott and several other people, 4 or 5 other people. And I was very disappointed in meeting him. He didn't seem to have anywhere near the grasp of issues that I thought he would have. I asked him a couple of questions, and after the second question, I didn't bother asking him anymore because I was so dissatisfied with his first 2 answers. So I'm not surprised at Scott following the president around in trying to ingratiate himself to the president. I think he's going to need the president's support the next time he runs for election. And as far as the Federal Reserve, a chairman of the Federal Reserve has never been fired in the history of the Federal Reserve, which was set up by President Woodrow Wilson back in the 1920s. So I don't think Trump really wants to do that because it'll give the Democrats another opportunity to call him a dictator. And I think that he gets a little bit tired of hearing that. And I think that ruffles his feathers a little bit too much. But he deserves it because of the things that he does, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, and I was going to say that I don't know if it's a good thing for the president to control the Federal Reserve.
I don't think it is.
It's just, we have a system where everybody has their responsibility. The president oversees it with the Congress, the Senate, and the House. And that's the way the system should be. So, but I give that Jerome Powell, I give him credit. He's a smart guy. He stood up to the president. He wasn't disrespectful. He was very respectful, but he wasn't afraid to say, "You're wrong." He kept shaking his head. And then I'm looking at him, and the president just pretended like he wasn't there when he was saying stuff. He was just totally ignoring him. So it doesn't give me much faith in our economy, Bill. I'm really worried, especially once Jerome Powell is gone. I'm going to be, because the president will probably put Tim Scott in his seat because he really was pumping up Scott like he's a genius when it comes to the economy. All right, Bill,
Listen, I understand. What do you know? Is there anything you know about Trump and his relationship with the guy that liked very young women?
Epstein, Jeffrey Epstein.
Yeah, did you read where Trump was introduced to his wife by Epstein?
I heard that.
Did you hear that?
But it goes back to our problem with the news media. It's hard to know when the media is being true media, factual,
That's right,
or spin media, which is what the media mostly is today. So yeah, I had heard that, and it's very confusing. But I have a bottom line feeling that Trump, the Democrats and the Republicans, all the big shots, Trump, all the celebrities, Bill Clinton, all Hillary Clinton, all these Democrats and Republicans, they all were in Epstein's grip, and they enjoyed what they thought at the time was safe, terrible circumstances that they could enjoy on an island that Epstein owned. And now there's a great effort to protect everybody's names, not just Trump, but also Clinton and the Democrats. So it's like both sides. Nobody wants any of this stuff released.
No, I would agree with you with that. Yeah, that's part of the deep state that Trump was going to root out.
Yeah.
And that's why many of his followers are becoming disillusioned with him, because he's not doing much to root out the deep state.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how all this impacts the midterm elections. And I'm not sure. I think it evens. I mean, just to not go off on a segue here, but I think it all evens out. I don't think the Democrats are going to do much better than they have done, because there are a lot of problems with the Democratic Party too. But I'm still hopeful that that third party from Elon Musk, the America Party, is going to pull the rug out from the Republican Party, and we won't have any major party controlling the House or the Senate, which I think would be a good thing, and force both sides to come together and talk, which is, I think, the great hope that I have for this country.
Well, I have the same hope, no question about it. We need somehow to get together, the politicians and the people. But I think the only way it's going to happen is if the people really get together and force the parties to start looking to work for the good of the American people, not work for their own good and the success and the power of their own party.
All right. And then your column, let's go ahead and have you do your column, is on the breakdown of the two-parent family, and how it's deteriorating and the impact that it has on our society. Go ahead, Bill.
Thank you, Ray. My commentary last week talked about the people of America losing their faith and the significant decline in people attending religious services and practicing a religion. I stated this last week and said I believed it was weakening the strength economically and militarily and morally of our land of the free and home of the brave. I am very sorry to say I do not believe we are the nation that climbed out of the Great Depression to return to world economic leadership, won the Second World War for ourselves and for all of mankind, and won the Cold War against won the Cold War, creating greater opportunities for the freedom and democracy to flower around the world. I believe the second great pillar of strength for the American Republic was the strength of the family. Faith in family ignited the physical strength, moral courage, and intellectual capacity to chop and hoe and rake and clear and dig, to remove the trees and underbrush to create the great American Republic out of this enormous wilderness. Extremely unfortunately today, the American family is breaking down and has been for a number of years. Strong families have long been the backbone of our nation, providing stability, values, and a foundation for future generations. As I stated earlier, over the course of the last few decades, we have witnessed a significant decline in traditional family structure. What has caused this in our fortress of freedom and land of liberty? Following are some of my ideas on what has caused this to occur. Marriage, once considered a lifelong commitment, is now seen as optional or temporarily. Divorce rates peaked in the 1970s and the 1980s, but remain very high today. At the same time, single-parent households have become much more prevalent. Studies show that children from single-parent households often face greater economic struggles, lower educational opportunities, and increased emotional challenges. The weakening of religious and community ties has also played a very significant part in the demise of the two-parent family. Historically, churches, local community organizations, and extended families provided strong support systems that reinforced traditional family values. However, religious participation has declined in recent decades, leading to a weakening of the support networks. Without these stabilizing influences, many families lack the moral and social guidance that once helped them keep themselves together. With government assistance programs are necessary, support struggling families. Some policies have unintentionally contributed to family breakdown. Welfare programs that provide greater benefit to single-family households than to married couples can discourage marriage and family unity. Additionally, policies that fail to support working families, such as a lack of affordable child care, job opportunities, can create economic stresses that further destabilize families. In conclusion, the family remains the most fundamental unit of society. When families thrive, communities thrive. When families break down, the effects ripple through the generations. It is up to us to work together for solutions that strengthen the family and restore the American family, ensuring a brighter future for our children and our nation. Each and every American must become stronger, morally, physically, and better educated to fully understand the obligations of marriage, the individual responsibility that is necessary to create a happy, productive marriage and produce educated, morally responsible children. Until next time, enjoy yourself, and thanks for listening to my column.
All right, good column, Bill. I like the idea of addressing the two-parent family because I know when I grew up, my dad worked 40 to 60 hours a week. And my mom, she had a part-time job, but she was at home taking care of the house and the kids. Now, if I didn't have a parent taking care of me, I probably would have been worse than I was as a child. I had a sister, younger sister, and an older brother. I don't know what would have happened if there wasn't a parent to prevent us from even inadvertently crossing a line and doing something that would get us in trouble. Sometimes you don't mean to do things, but you don't know things because, you're young, and a parent is supposed to be a guide. This whole topic that you're talking about, addresses a big issue that a lot of people don't really want to talk about. They just want to talk about the consequences of interfering with what's happening rather than talking about the damage that's done when there's only one parent in a family.
I don't think that people have any idea how much damage is done to children of one parent families.
Yeah, I don't know. How do you control your kid? Do you hope that your kid is smart enough with common sense not to do the things that they might do on their own? Do you know what I mean? You need a parent with experience. And it also creeps into this question about who should have influence over my kids, the government, the school, or me, at least until my children are 16. Up until the age of 16, I should have complete control over them. Nobody should be telling my kid what to believe, what their religion should be, or what their sex should be. Or this whole transgender issue. I have no problem with an adult who decides, hey, I'm really a woman and I want to change from being a man to a woman. That's your choice. You do whatever you want. But don't push that kind of logic into the heads of my kids who are vulnerable to this type of messaging and influence. And, it's like a political propaganda, that they might believe that and sympathize with something. Let me, as a parent, decide. So this whole topic that you're talking about, I think, is very important. And unfortunately, when it's addressed, the response from people who are upset with it turns immediately to race and racism. So if we talk about single parents, they talk about the broken families that happen to be in African American communities. And I know that there are just as many white families that have single parents as black families. I just don't believe that. And Hispanics, some Hispanics, and also, when you talk about the Arab and Muslim community, where they may have two wives, this whole structure. So people don't want to talk about it. I don't know if because they think it's too personal or what, but I think that it's a good topic and we should have an open and honest discussion about it.
Well, thank you, Ray, and I certainly agree with that. I don't think there's anything more important to the success of a nation than a strong two-parent family unit.
Yeah, and mainly because, again, it's young people don't have the experience to make their own decisions.
And I'd like to comment on something you said in regards to what gender I belong to. Fine, if you're in your 20s and you decide you've been a man, but you're really a woman, you want to change, wonderful. But when you start talking about 8, 9, 10-year-olds,
right?
The school, the doctor, someone saying, "Oh, I think he's not really a boy; he should be a girl."
Right.
They don't know what they are at
Right.
that particular age, boys or girls. And I think that that's a terrible thing that we were allowing people to do in this country for a number of years. And thankfully, President Trump has pretty much put a stop to all of that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that there's a heightened awareness of the threat to the two-parent family and this idea that outside forces, outside lobbies, I'm going to call them, for whatever, the right or the left, they want to tell us how to raise our kids. And I don't think that's anybody's business. As long as I don't cross the line and hurt my kids, or inflict violence on my kids, nobody, and as long as I give my kids the basics that they need to survive and become better people. Nobody should interfere with that whatsoever. Sexual
Absolutely.
education, all that stuff. It really bothers me. Religion, what they believe, that's up to me to decide. I happen to be Christian, not because some outside agency said I need to be Christian, but that's what my parents were. They were Christian. Had they been Jewish, I know I'd be Jewish. Had they been Muslim, I know I'd be Muslim. But that was a choice of my family. My parents, who lived long lives, they decided what they decided, and I followed in their footsteps. What's wrong with that? That model, I think, is the way we should go, but it's a hard case to make in today's world. They want that stopped.
Yep.
All right, Bill, we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to switch topics and talk about Zelenskyy in the Ukraine and the controversial law that he's pushing that would bring an end to two special anti-corruption agencies that were set up that would be put under the Prosecutor General's office. Now, to me, it looks like consolidation, but we'll talk a little bit about that and how it's impacting the war in Ukraine. I'm Ray Hanania with Bill Lipinski. We're going to be right back right after these messages.
Welcome to El Shaba Restaurant at 2029 15 Mile Road in Sterling Heights, where you'll be treated to the finest in Middle Eastern cuisine. Enter into the exotic atmosphere of tantalizing aromas and enjoy our chicken or beef shawarma hummus, kebabs, specially seasoned Syrian-style beef burgers, babia fatouche salad, soups and sandwiches, plus desserts that include baklava, ice cream, and more. Just call in your order at 586-565-6661 or go to our website and place your order now at elshaba.square.site. That's elshaba.square.site. Then you'll see all there is to choose from. Try us today. You'll like us. We are located at 2097 15 Mile Road in Sterling Heights. Life for Relief and Development has now been rated as one of the best charities for humanitarian aid. Life's humanitarian projects span the globe, and Life is celebrating its 30th anniversary of providing essential life-saving aid to people and communities in 36 countries, regardless of race, color, religion, or cultural background. Where there is life, there is hope. And when disaster occurs here or around the world, including being one of the first responders to the Turkey-Syria earthquake crisis, Life for Relief and Development rushes in to provide food, medical aid, and shelter to those in need. We are looking to help the earthquake victims, and we take 0% overhead on emergency donations. So please help improve these efforts. Learn more about our involvement to help the helpless and bring hope where it's needed most, and make your tax-deductible donation to Life for Relief and Development now at lifeusa.org or call 248-424-7493. That's 248-424-7493.
And welcome back to Two Guys on Politics. I'm Ray Hanania with my co-host Bill Lipinski, and we just got through talking about President Trump, the economy, and his little tiff with Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell and the support he was getting from Senator Tim Scott. And then also we listened to Bill Lipinski's column on the breakdown of the two-parent family, which opened up into discussion we had about the impact of two parents and outside influences, how people want to control our kids from outside the family. So it was a very interesting discussion. I hope you enjoyed it. If you missed that part, please, if you're just joining us during the second part, please go to twoguysonpolitics.com on YouTube and listen to the entire segment of our podcast today, which is July 25th, 2025. So in segment 2, now we're going to talk about Zelenskyy in the Ukraine. Now he's in a war, a terrible war, but with one of the biggest bullies in the world, the Russians. They're just horrible. And Vladimir Putin is just a terrible tyrant and dictator. And he's done a great job for almost 3 years now, fending off and leading the country against Russia's attacks. But recently, and this past week, I think Tuesday, Zelenskyy signed a law that was passed by his parliament. It wasn't pushed by Zelenskyy, but it was his parliament that wanted to eliminate two anti-corruption agencies that were created in 2014. One is called the Anti-Corruption Bureau, and the other one is called the Specialized Anti-Corruption Prosecutor's Office. They were created in 2014, back before Zelenskyy was president, looking at corruption in Ukraine. And Ukraine had a lot of corruption, I think. But it didn't mean there won't be an anti-corruption agency. There's still the Prosecutor General's office. They're putting both these agencies under the existing Prosecutor General's office in Ukraine. However, that still raised what I think was this Russian attack against Zelenskyy, that he's corrupt, and this proves that he's corrupt. And I have a bad feeling that this is going to be used to tear him down. And I think it's a bad thing that in the middle of a war like this, that the leader is taken out, whether we like him or not. Well, what do you make of all this stuff about the corruption and Ukraine and Zelenskyy and Russia?
First of all, Ray, if you go back to before the war started, before the Russians ruthlessly invaded Ukraine, Zelenskyy was really not held in that higher regard by his own people.
Correct.
He was elected to clean up the government, to get rid of the corruption. And they felt that he was going about it far, far too slowly. So his popularity was not that high at all. Then the Russian invasion occurred. He stood up to the Russians. He mobilized the morale of the Ukrainian people. He put forth a very good military defense, and the people rallied around him. And that helped him get support in this country, in other countries in Europe. I'm not surprised at people being upset by what just happened, because in reality now, Zelenskyy controls what will be investigated, because he now controls the individual.
The Prosecutor General's office.
Right, exactly. Yeah. All right. So they're not going to do anything he doesn't want to do. Now, I think there is still considerable corruption in his government, that he's done a great job of prosecuting the war against the Russians, yes. But my problem is, where do we go from here? I don't want to side with the Russians. He's a bully. He's a dictator. Yes. He's ruthless. He was absolutely wrong in what he did invading Ukraine. On the other hand, I am not happy with the way the government in the Ukraine has been run and is still being run. I think Zelenskyy has done a very, very good job as a wartime leader, but I don't think he's done a very good job on rooting out corruption. But we are on his side. Each and every day, it seems like we become more and more on his side, which is understandable. But where does it all end? I've flown a Ukrainian flag from the front of my house since 3 or 4 days after this war started. I continue to do that. I continue to support Zelenskyy and the Ukraine, but I have more and more questions all the time about when are they going to straighten out their government, get rid of the corruption. Because if they can't do that, I don't really know what the difference is going to be between the Russians controlling part of the Ukraine or Ukrainians controlling part of Ukraine. And at first I thought these demonstrations were just in the area of the Ukraine that was Russian speaking, and these people really generally side with the Russians. But it's not. It was across the country.
Right.
It was from east to west. So the general idea, I think, is that a lot of people in the country are unhappy with the corruption. And then they're unhappy with the war because the war just seems to be dragging on and on and on. And I don't know if we, the United States or the Europeans, have to do something, to change things in the Ukraine. But there has to be some change, because the Ukrainians cannot possibly win a protracted war with Russia.
Yeah, listen, I mean, we both know the history of Ukraine. It was originally a part of Russia, the Soviet Union. Stalin suppressed it in a horrible way, brutalized the people in Ukraine right after World War II, killed millions of people in Ukraine, put his own people in there to control Ukraine, and one reason they did that was it was a valuable piece of land to get all the elements and things that they needed for their own economy. They would actually Stalin would steal the food from the Ukrainians. You could not even have or hide grain in your house. If they found you hiding grain, you could be shot and killed, your whole family. That was the Russian policy. So Ukraine has always had an ugly history. And unfortunately, I think today's Ukraine is different from the old Ukraine that was under the thumb of the Russians. And I think that's what Vladimir Putin wants to do. He wants to put today's Ukraine back under the thumb of his new Soviet oppressive government and expand what he's trying to do beyond Ukraine to include all of the Eastern European countries. He wants to take them all back. Now, I look at it may be true that there may be some corruption, but is it wise to address the issue of corruption when you're in the middle of a war that so far has not been won and where your own allies have not been strong enough to support you? The biggest problem with this whole war is I blame Biden for being slow. He was worried about the election. He was having cognitive issues. We weren't tough enough with the Russians to stop it. And I think Russia got a signal that, hey, nobody's going to stand up to me. I'm just going to grab these lands and maybe force a quick end, that the Ukrainians won't be tough enough to stop me. But the Ukrainians proved to be very strong and resilient and tough. And they really beat up on Putin's forces to the extent where they've lost so many assets. And Russia, I think, is militarily on the brink of collapse. I think they have problems. But we have hesitated to stand up and do the right thing there. And I think it's because of this history of corruption in Ukraine. We don't feel right about defending a country that we, for many years, associated with corruption. What do you think, Bill?
Well, I think that that's true. And I think that Biden's position in regards to this war, and I unfortunately believe Trump is continuing it,
yes.
is that we do not give the Ukrainians enough military might to win this war, okay? We just give them enough to hang on, to score some victories. And the Europeans the same way. They're just as responsible as we are. I think the purpose of the Americans and the Europeans is for the Ukrainians to bleed the Russians as much as possible.
Right.
We don't want to upset the Russians too much because we don't want them invading Poland or Lithuania or Latvia or Estonia. We just want the poor Ukrainians to keep fighting, to keep losing people, men, women, and children, but to keep killing Russians because we believe that's advantageous to us. Well, I don't think it's advantageous to us. I don't think it's advantageous to Europe, and I certainly don't think it's advantageous to the Ukrainians. But by the same token, we just do not, how long have they been waiting for fighter planes? How long have they been waiting for, various drones that we have? It's a very bad situation. We need for some people in the American government and in the European governments to decide we're going to let Ukraine go. We're going to let the Russians take it over, and whatever happens, happens. Or we're going to have to fund them, and we're going to have to give them the military weaponry, to somehow defeat the Russians. And if not defeat them, at least make them so badly beaten up that they decide just to quit the war.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think part of the problem is this war has gone on for almost 3 years. And if you live in Ukraine, it's a horrible situation. And now you're getting used to the war and the bombs all around you. And now you're thinking of the country itself and the issue of corruption, which was around before the war started.
No question.
A combination of eroding the people's strength, I think. And I blame that on us. We did not do a good job we could have stepped in and helped end this war. We could have ended this war 2 years ago by giving Ukraine everything it needed. instead of allowing it to drain us, but we didn't do that. And Trump, they say that Trump's now making this accusation that the Clintons broke the law by faking the Russian dossier that was tied to Trump during the election, during the second election against Biden. And I believe that was completely made up by the Democrats, that Trump had no different relationship with the Russians than any other Democrats had with the Russians, but they sold that to the American people. And there was this perception that Trump wasn't going to be tough on the Russians, and he hasn't been tough on the Russians. So this whole circumstance is horrible. It's just ugly. And but I always like to point out, when President Bush, when George W. Bush was elected president in 2001, he was sworn in January 2001. He was not a great president. He had been the favorite son of his father, who was a brilliant president and a brilliant politician, George H.W. Bush. He put his son in as governor. He put his son in Congress and the Senate. He pushed his son. He did everything for him. And even when you look at the bios of George W. Bush, he was kind of a laid-back goof kid who you would be happy to be friends with in college and go drinking, a drinking buddy. But on September 11th, the terrorists attacked the United States, and suddenly Trump became a great leader. And I think that's how Zelenskyy is. I think Zelenskyy is a great leader because of that date that the Russians invaded Ukraine, and he brought the country together. And I think that erased a lot of the problems that he had. So I don't know. I think I can live with the issue of corruption until this war is over, but definitely it shouldn't be addressed now. It should be addressed later, in my opinion. I think it's a mistake that they're bringing it up.
Well, I think, but who's bringing it up? That's the question. Is it really the Ukrainian people that in the midst of a war where there should be total unity are bringing up the fact that there's still too much corruption in Zelensky's government? I mean, that's a terrible indictment. But this whole situation is, how we wound up wandering into this situation. And then the situation in Gaza and the way we support the Israelis. I'm with the Israelis, but the Israelis have made one mistake after another mistake in that war. Yes, they're winning the war, but they are certainly winning no friends any place in this world. In fact, a lot of countries that supported them at the start of this no longer support them. I've always felt that it was our job as the Americans, ever since the end of the First World War, to get in there, to arbitrate these situations and try to find a solution. That's the role we try to play. That's the role we should play. But sometimes, such as Gaza and Ukraine, I don't think we've done a very good job.
Yeah, as a leader, we should be using our influence to prevent people from going too far.
Absolutely.
And we haven't done that in Gaza, because right now they're killing kids, are dying, they're starving, they're dying. It's a horrible situation. And the more this happens, the less support Israel is getting around the world. I don't know if any of that will change as long as Benjamin Netanyahu is in charge. So, it's a very depressing situation. But I still think that before we get to changing the corruption, we need to defeat the Russians in Ukraine. I don't know how close we are to doing that, and I'm worried about it. So that bothers me. All right, I will. Let me just talk about. I have a few topics that I've written about this week on my syndicated column page at hanania.com. A lot of it has to do with Orland Park. One has to do with the former mayor of Orland Park. There was a hearing this past week in which the financial people he hired in Orland Park, which is the biggest city between Chicago and Joliet, he hired these financial people when he was mayor. They said they were told not to release information about the existing debt until after the April 1 elections. He did not want the public to know how much money he was spending and digging the village into debt, on the assumption, I think, that if he won, he could then deal with it. He could raise taxes. He could manipulate the funds and the budget to make it look like everything was okay. But of course, Keith Pekow lost huge in a landslide to a guy named Jim Dodge, who was a former trustee for like 25 years, I think, or 22 years, a financial genius too. And they realized that Orland Park under Keith Pekow was headed toward a $250 million debt. So these disclosures have been shocking to taxpayers in Orland Park, and Pekow is out there, saying that they're all lies, but his own people are the ones that said, he's the one that messed up. Another column that I wrote is about, and you probably saw some of this, Orland Township had a Secretary of State office that was opened, I think, in 2001 by Jesse White. And he opened a small satellite office in Orland Township to help cover the southwest suburbs. Because if we didn't have one, you have to drive all the way to Bridgeview. You got to drive just pretty far off to Joliet or to Chicago Heights or downtown to get Secretary of State offices. And a lot of these services were for senior citizens. So they opened one in Orland Township, but as soon as Pekow had the power in 2020, he shut the office down. He ordered it closed. It moved across the street to the township offices where it's been running. But Pekow's Republican trustees have taken over the township, 3 Republican trustees, and they immediately shut the Secretary of State's office down again. And it looks like that from my columns, when I'm looking at this, and this is expressed and detailed in my column, that this was a coordinated effort between the township Republicans and the mayor of Tinley Park, Michael Glotz, to make Glotz, who's been in the shadow of popularity. Here's a guy that is, I think he's kind of like Trump in a way, that he feels his ego is better than his public image. And they came up with this plan to shut the offices, I believe, in Orland Township so that Mayor Glotz in Tinley Park could announce that he was going to restore them in Tinley Park and be the hero to the senior population. That type of political manipulation is so irresponsible and so horrible because these services are so important to the seniors. So those are my columns. If you want to read them at hanania.com, you could follow up. And I know we're coming to the end of our segment, Bill. If you have any comments at all on any of this, Bill, you let me know. How's that?
Okay.
All right, Bill. We've just had, I think we talked about a lot of topics at the end of the program. I'm Ray Hanania.
I'm Bill Lipinski.
And this has been Two Guys on Politics. Remember, go to twoguysonpolitics.com to get all the information about our show. And we do want to hear from you. We hope that we always give you Bill, especially Bill Lipinski, been in politics at so many different levels, national and local. He understands the issues. We're hoping that we're giving you insight in terms of what happens. You don't have to agree with all of our opinions, but we hope that it impacts how you view the world and how you come to conclusions. All right, we'll talk to you later.
We'd certainly like to hear from you. There's no question about it. We'd like to know if we're enlightening you in any way, shape, or form.
All right. All right, everybody. Thank you. We'll talk to you again. Bye-bye.
Are you going to start a restaurant or grocery store soon? Do you need floor plans and designs? Call Najee Abood at 734-744-9796. Do you want to buy kitchen and restaurant equipment at discount prices? Call Najee Abood now, 734-744-9796. New Concept Products and Design, the trademark of kitchen equipment. 5% discount on all purchases of $75,000 or more. New Concept Products and Design, new location, 31185 Schoolcraft in Livonia. Learn more at www.newconceptproducts.com. Call Najee Abood, 734-744-9796.
Ziyad brand. quality products from our family to yours. Ziad Brothers Importing offers the finest quality products, including brands like Sultan, Kraft, Nestle, Hook, Rico Picon, Donna, and many more. Ask your retailer to carry these fine products because you deserve the very best. For more information, visit our website at www.ziad.com. That's www.ziad.com. Ziad, quality products from our family to yours.